The 1600s were a turbulent time for Ireland. The rebellion of Hugh O'Neill came to an end, followed by the flight of the Earls in 1607, and a policy of banishment of military prisoners gave rise to the wild geese. The plantation of Ulster got underway, but was interrupted by the Catholic rebellion of 1641 with its much publicised atrocities. Cromwell's invasion and subsequent subjugation of the Irish resulted in the death or disappearance of 500,000 people and a precipitous drop in the population of about 40%, a much greater fall than that seen with the famine. Against this backdrop, many Irish people left for the Caribbean. Now, in the early 1600s, some were captured soldiers sent as slaves, others sold themselves as indentured servants, and they went to places such as St. Kitts, Antigua, and Montserrat, where up to 70% of the white population was Irish. But between 1652 and 1657, Cromwell's armies rounded up tens of thousands of Irish men, women, and children, drove them to Cork and across to Bristol, where they were sold as slaves, and shipped them off to work on the sugar plantations of Barbados and the new American colonies. Estimates of the number of Irish enslaved vary from 50,000 to 130,000, representing between 4 and 15% of the then total population. The history of the Irish slave trade is recounted in books such as Micheál Shukru's God's Executioner, White Cargo, and To Hell or Barbados. However, the descendants of these Irish servants and slaves are very much alive today, and this is reflected in the plethora of Irish surnames in the Caribbean, with a particularly high preponderance in Montserrat, Barbados, and Jamaica. With the increasing popularity of genealogy as a hobby, thanks to TV shows such as Who Do You Think You Are and Dead Money, more and more people, including people in the Caribbean, are researching their family trees. And with DNA testing being seen more frequently on the TV and high-profile DNA cases in the news, such as the recent finding of Richard III in the car park, more people are becoming aware of genetic testing as a way to connect with cousins who share long-forgotten ancestors. Various companies supply these services, and the next 10 years will see genetic genealogy blossom, allowing people to succeed in connecting with distant cousins where paper-based research has failed. And this includes people with Irish Caribbean ancestry who share a common ancestor in the early 1600s. The possibility of reconnecting people in the Caribbean with their distant cousins in Ireland has served as the inspiration for the formation of iCARA, Irish Caribbean Ancestry Reconnecting through DNA. The three cornerstones of iCARA are reconnection, reunion, and restoration. Now, reconnection involves reconnecting both with the ancestral homeland and also with living descendants. Similarly, reunion means reuniting with the local community and with genetic cousins. And restoration involves gaining back some of what was lost. The first step is reconnecting with the ancestral homeland. But where do you start? To answer this question, it helps to understand where the people reconnecting might be living today and to look at how their respective ancestral lines got there. The common ancestor to these distant cousins may have lived in the clan's ancestral homeland, where they had lived for maybe hundreds of years. Or perhaps the family had moved from there by the 1600s to another location nearby, and it was from here that the family member left for the Caribbean. There may be cases where documentation exists to help identify this last homestead prior to the exodus from Ireland, but such cases may be rare. After arriving in the Caribbean, the Irish may have stayed in the same place for many centuries, or may have moved within the Caribbean, or more recently may have migrated outside of it completely, perhaps to the US or the UK. Similarly, the relatives remaining in Ireland may have been forced from their lands, or may have been part of the rural to urban migration, or may have emigrated with the many thousands of Irish during and after the famine. The point is, the descendants of the common ancestor from the early 1600s could be anywhere, on both the Caribbean side and the Irish side. Furthermore, if a reunion is to be planned in Ireland, there are various places where it could conceivably take place. Each location represents an opportunity for local communities to become actively engaged in their own local research and development in preparation for reunion and restoration. And finally, in the absence of documentation to the contrary, the location of the clan homeland may be as close as we can get to defining the ancestral homeland of the Caribbean and Irish cousins. The good news is that reconnecting with the clan homeland could be a relatively simple process that may not require any DNA testing. If the surname is a single origin surname, then existing resources will help the individual pinpoint the surname to a relatively well-defined area quite easily. This is something the individual could do on their own, or perhaps the Ireland Reaching Out Parish Administrator, or iCARA, could assist in this process. For example, my own surname of Gleeson is quite conveniently located just south of Lough Derg in Tipperary. However, for surnames with multiple origins, such as Carroll, deciding which is the origin of the ancestor in question can be a difficult task. DNA testing can help pinpoint the most likely origin using a methodology developed by Dr. Tyrone Bowes of Irish Origins. iCARA can also help DNA testees with this process. The next step in the reconnection process is reconnecting with distant cousins. This will require DNA testing, specifically with family tree dnA. The concept is that both the Y chromosome and the Irish surname will have been passed down in an unbroken direct male line from father to son, from the common ancestor to each of the distant cousins, one on the Caribbean side and the other on the Irish side. A close or exact match on the Y-DNA test between two people sharing the same surname indicates that the two individuals shared a common ancestor within the last several hundred years, and certainly since the introduction of surnames about 1,000 years ago. Taken together with the known history of the Irish and the Caribbean, and any additional information from the family tree research of the individuals concerned, it is reasonable to conclude that they shared a common Irish ancestor in the early 1600s. In this way, a connection with living relatives can be made, and a family that has spent almost 400 years apart can be reunited. iCARA will manage the recruitment of people for DNA testing, help them interpret their results, help them pinpoint or confirm their clan homeland, and help them find genetic cousins who may have already been tested. If there are no matches in the existing database on family tree dnA, then it may be possible for an Ireland Reaching Out parish administrator based close to the clan homeland to inquire if there are any local people with the same surname willing to take the test. Once the distant cousins have been reconnected, the next step is reunion. Initially, this may occur virtually by a simple exchange of emails and then perhaps over the phone. iCARA will help advise and guide the testee as needed when contacting distant cousins. But reuniting with the local community is a second important step, and iCARA will introduce the testee to their local Ireland Reaching Out parish administrator, who will be best placed to help make these connections, which ultimately may result in a visit by the Caribbean cousin to meet his Irish cousin, and perhaps the local community. Restoration is an ongoing activity between descendants and local communities to restore some of what was lost. Now, for the individual, this may mean gaining a sense of belonging, a sense of self, a sense of family, kinship, and community. For the local community, this may mean rediscovering local knowledge and local history, remembering the past, and honouring the ancestors. And for the wider society, it may mean creating a legacy of restoration from what was a legacy of slavery. In the final paragraph of his book, To Hell or Barbados, Sean O'Callaghan says, "It is my fervent hope that Catholic families in Ireland will band together and do something for their long-forgotten brethren. I believe that time has come. And it won't be long before we wake up in the morning to find these kind of headlines in our local and national newspapers."